Hawaii is the most isolated island chain on Earth, 2,000 miles from the nearest continent in any direction. And for most of its history, that isolation was the point. The islands were not discovered by accident. They were settled deliberately by Polynesian navigators who crossed open ocean using stars and swells and kept the location of what they found largely to themselves. Hawaii developed in isolation for over 1,000 years before outside contact. It built a civilization, a religion, a system of law, and a geography of sacred places that were never intended for outsiders. Then came the outside world. The missionaries, the military, the statehood, the tourism economy. But not everything was opened up. Some places in Hawaii were restricted before the United States existed. Some were restricted by the United States itself. And some are restricted by the land itself. Terrain so hostile, so remote, so deliberately difficult to reach, that they have kept their secrets regardless of who tried to find them. These are 7 restricted places in Hawaii you're not meant to find. Place 7 Ni'ihau, the Forbidden Island. Ni'ihau is the westernmost inhabited island in the Hawaiian chain, 17 miles southwest of Kauai across the Kalakahi Channel. It is privately owned, purchased by Elizabeth Sinclair from King Kamehameha V in 1864 for $10,000 in gold, and has remained in the same family ever since. The Robinson family, current owners, maintain a strict no-visitor policy. No tourists, no journalists, no outsiders without an explicit invitation from the owners or the island's native Hawaiian residents. The approximately 170 people who live on Ni'ihau speak Hawaiian as their primary language. It is one of the last communities on Earth where this is true. The island has no paved roads, no running water system, no internet. It exists in a state of deliberate isolation maintained for over 160 years. The Hawaiian government has no jurisdiction over what happens inside it. The U.S. Navy has a small installation on the island's western coast. What happens there is not discussed publicly. You cannot visit Ni'ihau. It is not a matter of permits or fees. The island simply does not accept you. Place 6 Kaho'olawe, an island the U.S. military used as a target. Kaho'olawe is the smallest of the 8 main Hawaiian islands, located off the southwestern coast of Maui. During World War II, the U.S. Navy seized the island and began using it as a bombing range. They continued bombing it for 50 years by the time the Navy ceased operations in 1990, following decades of protest by native Hawaiian activists who considered the island sacred. An estimated 100,000 pieces of unexploded ordnance were distributed across its surface and buried in its soil. The Navy spent 10 years and over $400 million on cleanup. They cleared approximately 70% of the surface area. The remaining 30%, the interior valleys, the steep ravines, the underwater fringe, was left as is. Kaho'olawe was returned to the state of Hawaii in 1994. It is managed by a state commission. Public access is strictly controlled. Only permitted groups conducting cultural restoration work are allowed on the island, and only in cleared zones. The uncleared interior is permanently off limits. The island's archaeological sites, heiau temples, fish ponds, ancient habitation areas, remain largely unexcavated beneath the contaminated soil. What the Navy buried along with its ordnance has not been fully assessed. Place 5 The Na Pali Coast Sea Caves, Kauai, accessible only when the ocean allows it. The Na Pali coast on Kauai's northwest shore is one of the most visually dramatic coastlines in the United States. 4,000-foot sea cliffs dropping straight into the Pacific, with no road access and no developed trail to the shore. The only ways in are by boat in summer, by helicopter, or by the 11-mile Kalalau Trail, which ends at a beach with no way forward. Beneath the cliffs, carved into the basalt by thousands of years of wave action, there are sea caves, large ones, some extending hundreds of feet into the cliff face, with interior chambers large enough to shelter boats. Some contain freshwater springs where the cliff rock seeps water directly into the sea. The caves are not on any map. Access by boat is seasonal. Winter swells make the entire coastline impassable for months at a time, and in the summer months, entering the caves requires navigating through surge channels in a small craft with no margin for error. Native Hawaiians use these caves as hiding places during times of conflict, as burial sites and as places of ceremony. Some caves contain petroglyphs on their interior walls, unreachable except by water. The state of Hawaii has not surveyed them fully. Some have not been entered in living memory. Place 4 Pohakaloa Training Area, Hawaii Island. A military zone in the middle of the largest island. Pohakuloa Training Area sits at 6,000 feet elevation on the saddle between Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa on the Big Island. A vast, high-altitude lava plain covering over 100,000 acres. It is the largest military training installation in the Pacific. The surrounding landscape contains some of the most significant native dryland ecosystem in Hawaii, habitat for the palila, a federally endangered honeycreeper found only on the slopes of Mauna Kea. It also contains unexploded ordnance from decades of live fire training, scattered across terrain that has never been fully cleared. Pohakuloa is also located downwind from Mauna Kea's summit observatories. When the military conducts certain operations, the observatories are notified to close their domes. The nature of those operations is not publicly specified. The base is closed to civilians. Its interior, the lava fields, the cinder cones, the isolated Kipuka forest patches that survive inside the restricted zone, has not been ecologically surveyed in decades. Place 3 Mokumanamana, Necker Island. A sacred island no one was supposed to inhabit. Mokumanamana sits 150 miles northwest of Kauai, at the far edge of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. It is a narrow, windswept basalt ridge, barely a quarter-mile wide at its broadest point, rising out of open ocean with no shelter, no fresh water, and no capacity to support permanent human life. And yet archaeologists have found on it the highest concentration of Hawaiian religious structures of any island in the chain. Over 30 heiau, stone temple platforms, packed onto a single rocky outcropping in the middle of the ocean. Ancient. Hawaiians considered Mokumanamana a place of extreme spiritual power, a point where the physical world and the spirit world converged. The island was used for religious ceremony, not habitation. Access was restricted to priests. Today, Mokumanamana is part of the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, the largest marine protected area in the United States. Landing on the island requires a federal permit. Permits are almost never granted. The island sees perhaps a handful of authorized visitors per year. It looks today almost exactly as it did when the priests left. Place 2 Waimanu Valley, Hawaii Island. The valley at the end of the trail that doesn't exist. Waimanu Valley sits on the Hamakua coast of the Big Island, north of the more visited Waipio Valley. It is accessible by foot via a trail, if you can call it that drops 200 feet into Waipio, climbs back out, crosses 14 ravines, and descends again into Waimanu. The round trip is roughly 18 miles of some of the most technically demanding terrain in Hawaii. Waimanu was once inhabited. Taro Loi, flooded field terraces, cover the valley floor. House platforms are visible in the forest. The last permanent residents left in the 1940s. Since then, the valley has been reclaimed almost entirely by native vegetation. Access requires a camping permit from the state. The permit system limits entries to a small number of campers at a time. The valley has no facilities, no cell service, and no rescue infrastructure. The state does not publicize it. Most visitors to Hawaii Island have never heard of it. What remains in Waimanu, the archaeological sites, the native forest, the waterfalls that drop directly into the sea at the valley's mouth, has been seen by almost no one outside the communities who once lived there. Place. 1. The summit of Mauna Kea's restricted research zone, the mountain the indigenous community never stopped fighting for. Mauna Kea on the Big Island rises, 13,796 feet above sea level, and if measured from its base on the ocean floor, it is the tallest mountain on Earth. The summit plateau is home to 13 astronomical observatories operated by institutions from 9 countries. A 14th, the 30-meter telescope, has been approved and opposed for over a decade. The summit is accessible by road, but only to the base of the cinder cone. The true summit, Pu'uwekiu, and the research zone surrounding the observatories are restricted. Access requires institutional affiliation or a guided ranger program, but the restriction that matters most here is not governmental. Mauna Kea is the most sacred place in native Hawaiian cosmology, the mountain where the Sky Father Wakea and the Earth Mother Papahanaumoku first joined. The mountain is a burial ground. It is a place of worship. It was restricted by Hawaiian tradition long before any observatory was built. The fight over who controls access to Mauna Kea's summit, the state, the scientific institutions, or the people for whom the mountain has been sacred for 1,000 years, has not been resolved. The mountain sits in the middle of it, unchanged as it always has. Hawaii presents itself as open, welcoming, aloha, and it is, in the places it has chosen to open, but the restricted places, the bombed,